Good evening, everyone. Yad as ine shik'e ado shidne'e. She'eya Tatiana Benali Yanishia, Tohto Nasha, Nanis Ajatachi Nishle, Nashashidine Bashachin, Kimpachini Dashache, Bitani Dashnale. Akut ego Dinesa Nishle. Hello, my name is Tatiana Benali. I am from Tebet'a on the Navajo Nation. I am the Zuni clan of Tachitni and born for the Tewa Bear Clan. I currently reside in Lenape-Hoking and am here with the American Indian Community House. Thank you all so much for joining us, for the people joining on Zoom and for the people joining through our Facebook live stream. This is a part of a series hosted by the American Indian Community House to provide an intentional online space to collectively explore and discuss resources, information regarding Indigenous issues and conflicts that directly affect us today. Through our shared concern and efforts, we will discuss actions, solutions, and the many different ways we can contribute toward the movement and change making. Online in solidarity, led by and for Indigenous folks, we will continue to focus on providing a space that is accessible, respectful, and in unity. For those who are tuning in with us for their first time, you can check out H's Instagram, Facebook, or sign up with the newsletter from the American Indian Community House website to keep up to date on the upcoming events. There is programming on Wellbriety support, elder storytelling, makers labs, at-home fitness classes, census events, Native Theater Thursdays, as well as this series and many others. So stay tuned to our social media so you won't miss out. We actually do have an event that's coming up this weekend as well. H is co-hosting an event on Sunday, September 20th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. An event titled March for Climate Justice Through Racial Justice. They are meeting at Columbus Circle. If you're planning on going, please wear a mask and abide by social distancing protocols. And just like a quick summary of the events, I'll just go ahead and read the description. September 20th, we are marching because we know that addressing the climate crisis effectively rests on our commitment to racial justice. This isn't the first march calling for climate justice and racial justice, and it won't be the last. The march will kick off and set a tone for Climate Week by prioritizing Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples, making clear the intersection between climate justice and racial justice. And you can find the link to that event in the Facebook chat or the Zoom chat. Again, that's this coming Sunday, March 20th. Meet at Columbus Circle, wear your mask, social distance. So far we've had the social justice series on Native-led movements in Mashpee, Wet'suwet'en, 5 Southern tribes, Shinnecock, 6 nations. And this evening we're headed to O'odham Nation for some updates. And again, throughout these installments, we are continuously working on collectively understanding how to garner intertribal solidarity, flesh out our definitions of self-determination, settler colonialism, and share resources with each other. So today we are joined by the O'odham Anti-Border Collective, and we have a couple of the members here with us today, so we're so blessed for that. Ayesehya so much for joining us, Nellie, Napoleon, Amra, and Amber. So if we could quickly just introduce ourselves in whatever way that means to you. Napoleon, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Shapachue Kani Napchugik Napoleon Marietta, Ani Burak Maratham Tanatham and Tipash, Ani Nastotin Akamchid Akamaratham Chikshachid Hapakiski Gitam. Hello everyone. My name is Napoleon Marietta. I'm a grad student here at Arizona State University. I'm Akamarotam Tanatam and Pipash. I grew up on the Gila River Indian community. I'm one of the founding members of the Anti-Border Collective. And yeah, so it's really good to see everyone, or not good to see some people, but there's like black boxes. But I'm gonna try not to pass out talking to this mask. And a reminder, always wear a mask to keep yourself safe. I hope that you all are safe in your areas. And Masapa, thank you so much. And we do have some of our other members here as well, if they want to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Yeah, Nelly and Amra or Amber. Sorry.
Yeah. Hi, Anya Chugi, Nelly Joe David, Margarita Venegas David, Hollister John David, Aho Amjad. My name's Nelly Joe David. My mother is Margarita Venegas David, and my father is Hollister John David. I'm from Ajo, Arizona. I'm also one of the founding members of the Anti-Border Collective, and it's really good to be here today.
All right. Skikdash, Anyam Chuge, Gamber Ortega, Ani Najo Geneva 1, Ani Og, Melvin Ortega Bap, Ani Amjad Suboitak, Najo Amjad Suboitak. So my name is Amber Ortega. So I'm Tahanawatam and Hiacharatam, and I come from the village of Coldfields. And that's my mom's village, and I'm from the district of Babakivri, and I consider Tucson right now my temporary home. We joke about being people who migrate, so I'm a little bit. I feel like I'm from a little bit of everywhere in this area. Just the Res, Ajo, Tucson. Quito Paquito. But I'm new to it was this past year that I came onto the Anti-Border Collective, and yeah, that's all I have right now.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for introducing yourselves and joining us today. Lastly, we have Amra. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi. I am Sigrid Amra Salamon. I'm an Atam descendant from Yuma. Yuma is historically part of separate Atam territory, and there was also a large community of Akwana Atam and Tahana Atam people who came there at the end of the 19th century under many times forced labor conditions. And our families are unrecognized, both our separate families and then our other Atam families from Yuma, but we are working towards recognition. I'm from the Salamon, Mendez, Yunus, and Mendez families.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. So real quickly, so this is an event put on by the American Indian Community House, which is in New York, Lenapehoking territory. So a lot of the relatives that are tuning in are residing in that area. And so for them, we're just trying to educate them on what is happening and what the Anti-Border Collective is doing, what brought you guys together and whatnot. So if we could just kind of field the discussion from there. Napoleon, if you wanted to start.
Yeah, so first off, I think I can read the OABC statement, which we kind of founded each other off of. So through Atam, traditional territory is occupied by borders, states, settlements, mines, dams, extractive and invasive agriculture, bombing ranges, and freeways. We keep our roots intact by maintaining connection with each other and our Druid with the intention of breaking these barriers down. And we believe in indigenous autonomy and liberation Our liberation is inherent in our right to move freely. We impose any colonial structures meant to harm us, disarm us, divide us, and destroy us. We acknowledge and respect our two-spirit, trans, non-binary, author men relatives. We respect women in a post-settler colonial influence, patriarchy, and sexism within outside of our communities. So that's pretty strong. And I think when we started, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, I don't even remember, but we've been friends longer than that. And so from where I was coming from, in the northern part of Arizona, well, southern Arizona, which is Akimaratam territory, where the Gila River Indian community resides, we were dealing with a lot of colonial structures, and one of them was the freeway of Loop 202 freeway that we've been fighting since the 80s into now, since recently. And so when we were in that particular struggle, we were connecting that with down south in Tono and Hiacha territory, where we could kind of collect knowledge from each other and connect our struggles. And we found that through our traditional homelands of the southern area, and recognize that our territories were breaking down these barriers of territories because we want to connect all these struggles, and none of them, are different from each other, because we all connect in language, songs, traditions, culture, what have you. So for me, coming in the collective, building relationships with Nelly, learning about Donna, and then also them learning about us and what we're doing up here. We all kind of just wanted to say, hey, we should just start something and then just do it. Start making people knowing that these are not two different separate things. These are all connected, right? Because a lot of people kept asking questions like, hey, do you guys know what's going down at the border? It's just like, well, of course, we shouldn't all be knowing of these things going on in our traditional territory. So for me, that's how I kind of got involved and started this thing up. We started this thing up, and yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything you'd like to add, Nelly? I know you've been involved with, the work on the ground as well. So I'm sure you have interesting aspect to add.
Yeah, I think Napoleon covered it really well with, our purpose and kind of why we wanted to get together and kind of break through the colonial borders and barriers that come between us as O'odham. And, for us, Tono O'odham and Hiacha O'odham that are from areas near the border, we also often hear from O'odham in Mexico relatives that are very disconnected from the north part. And so I think one of the things that I think we've wanted to do as a collective is really connect more with everyone, and, not O'odham in Mexico, O'odham in displaced O'odham in California that were, ended up there through relocation programs. Just knowing that we have, we're huge and we have this massive power, collectively among us O'odham, and just wanting to have, some kind of a group to, start to do things to promote that, connectivity between us. And personally, I outside of, the struggle of our own, was greatly influenced by Palestine. I got to take a trip in October, and myself and a fellow O'odham, and we noticed how similar colonialism was in many ways, and it was a marvel to see how interconnected Palestinians were despite the borders and barriers between them. And that spurred a lot of conversation too, And so like there were so many reasons, we have for our own selves getting together. And I think part of the global indigenous struggle around us has really inspired us to really take action to move forward and maintain that connectivity that we've always had, but is being threatened.
Right. I think that connection is so beautiful, and I definitely respect like the work that you're doing as a collective. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. Amra and Amber, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I can go real quick. So when I visited Aho, so I was already on this journey to, just reconnect with who I was as an O'odham, and to understand, the Hiachip part of my family. And that's how I was introduced to OABC. Like I realized that there were, different groups doing different work. And I saw that, this group brought together various bands of O'odham and focused on, the connection of each group, each tribe, there's just numerous efforts being made to revitalize our cultures, to acknowledge lands and territories. And it was just a beautiful group of people who just welcomed me in, and were willing to share, and also who were open to allowing me to share my experience and my knowledge. And I feel like as a group we're in that constant effort of connecting and relating to one another and working together to establish those stronger connections with our people beyond the borders, beyond the barriers of even within our own nations. I grew up seeing the Tohono O'odham Nation as like, a nation. You see yourself as separate. I remember going to like NAU, and I was involved. I attempted to be involved in different groups, but I didn't feel connected, and I didn't understand what I was missing. And it's taken some time, but I definitely feel like a lot of gratitude being able to be a part of this eclectic group of O'odham. And yeah, Amra, if you want to go.
Sure. So I guess the short version of the long story is I grew up in Northern California, totally disconnected from O'odham territory, and even from that side of my family, but always knowing that I was O'odham, and having kind of this like urban experience as a mixed person. Knowing what tribe you're from, but not knowing what it's like in the community, and knowing that I have relatives over here, but we just don't talk that much. And so I actually got kind of reconnected with the community through participating in solidarity work with the Zapatistas, and met other O'odham down there in Chiapas, and started connecting with them, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, about our concerns about the border and how it was dividing O'odham people, and border violence and militarization. And that kind of led me to move closer to Yuma, where I'm from. I eventually moved down to San Diego to spend time with my own elders, and then started reconnecting with the rest of my family in Yuma, and then getting involved in supporting O'odham sovereignty, because as a descendant, I felt like that was, what I owed my ancestors, and my elders encouraged me to do that. My grandparents really were, very encouraging of Zapatismo. They felt like that was a connection to their, what their elders had gone through, that resistance. And then they also encouraged me to go back to our tribal communities and learn as much as I can, me and my cousins. So we're doing that work, and I met a lot of the folks here through, as Napoleon mentioned, like the resistance to the desecration of Moat Zog, South Mountain, and the 202 freeway, and also supported resistance work, and I just feel like it was a space that welcomed descendants, welcomed our kind of diasporic O'odham, you know, folks who ended up in California because of relocation or farm labor or displacement. And you know, there's a lot of O'odham from that experience who want to reconnect, and protecting our sacred sites is a way to do so. And so that's why I'm involved in this work.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I think there's something about being Native that makes you care for the land in a completely different way. And I've seen, you know, we've had this series on Indigenous folks in Mashpee, Wet'suwet'en, Six Nations territory. And Napoleon, you mentioned this a little bit briefly. Loop 202 happened, and I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about the rich history leading up to this. And I'm sure like a lot of y'all have connected through movement works on past issues and your relatives from before and before, you know. So if you could give like a little bit of history or background, and this can be open to anybody as well.
Yeah, so people call it South Mountain, but traditionally for us here, it's Modoc, and there's a whole history behind that. It's one of our sacred mountains, and not getting too much into it. It's a place where our ancestors and us today, we still take care of it, and we still practice and our traditions, and we have a rich culture and history there. So when back then, you know, when others were voicing their opinion about it, there was a lot of understanding of this traditional knowledge and understanding of it. Later on, when recently we've had a collective and a group that have always been there fighting it and talking about it and doing stuff like this, webinars, videos. And so my influence is heavily from them, the ones that came before and the ones that are still here present. And so the thing that really connect us in a lot of what how we ended up meeting up from the desecration of our area of the mountain is like how we recognize colonialism and settler colonialism in our different territories, and it's very different. How this freeway project, being part of the Arizona Department of Transportation project for a more larger scale of transportation, and how that's going to be internationally um, inspired by what's going down also in the South. So when that was happening, and like Tatiana, you're saying that how like as Indigenous people we have connection to the land first and foremost, and when something impacts a sacred site, a sacred area, and that can mean anything, then it's going to impact everything else. So, you know, Dono, Akchin, Hiachid, you know, all these different areas are connected through, you know, through one specific area or another, whether that be rivers, you know, rivers, lakes, you know, mountains, anything. So when this was going on, you know, we knew of other folks in their struggles down south, how that's um, cutting off our lifeline of things that we connect with our relatives, and traditionally what we used to do, crossing those areas for ceremonies, times of the season. So I think those were really what motivated us to kind of get together, and what motivated us to kind of fight um, alongside one another, because we're understanding that relationality between each other, and how important it is to say, here's something going on in Phoenix, but it's a larger picture of what's going on also through all of our territories, and in one way or another, it's going to impact, Tohono or Salt River or Ak-Chin. Like, these are just one of many few of the struggles that we need to connect on. And um, what anti-border means is, we don't, like, for me, when we talk about that, we mean that there's no reservations. There's no such thing as a reservation. You're not from the Gila River Indian community. You're not from Tohono Nation. Our traditional territories, it should matter, and it does matter to us that we continue to fight alongside each other because of the traditional homelands that we have and the connection that we have to it.
Right, right. Thank you so much. Nellie and Amber, would you like to chip in or tune in?
Yeah, to kind of go off of Napoleon, I don't know how many years ago I met Napoleon, but, I do remember learning about Luke 202 and the desecration, and also just being frustrated because in different areas, because our traditional landscape is so large, there were certain areas of the Jowett that, folks hadn't heard about these things. And for me in particular, I'm a student over here at the University of Arizona, College of Law, and they invited the new federal judge, which was the first Native judge. And they made a big deal over here at the U of A. A lot of people thanked her for being like an environmental steward and all these things, unbeknownst to the fact that she's had a very conservative record. And one of the first things she did in her administration was to, as a judge, was to approve the blasting in the Loop 202 freeway. And, out here, in this area of the Jowett, Chukchon, it was really frustrating to be under this whole Native program with Native people, and there was just no knowledge of this. And knowing that, Napoleon and comrades up in Akimel O'odham territory were working so hard to get this out, and yet, we're not unified. And then also, relating to what Napoleon said about, the struggle being connected to the border, learning that this Sun Corridor, Canamex Corridor, kind of relating to NAFTA, because it's about, trade coming from Canada all the way down to the States, all the way down to Mexico. And one of the reasons why they wanted to expand the freeway was to, make, to kind of support capitalism in their trade routes. And one of the reasons that they want to militarize the border is to protect their goods in these trade routes. And just like, just that connection being made, I think a lot of people don't really a lot of folks aren't making those connections between us. And I think like the way that our group kind of got together organically, what I love about us is that we are making those connections between us just by telling our stories. And even like early on, just a conversation between Napoleon, myself, and Amra, we were sharing last names of our family members and realizing that, there's a lot of Hiachit O'odham names that are up there in Akimel O'odham territory. Oh, wow, like we are like super creative or related. And then also just realizing how recent the bombing range is and how that completely just severed a connection, a family connection that we all once had. Anything to add, friend?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot to piece together with these colonial barriers that have been established that have severed our ties. Because when I learned about the being Hiachit O'odham, I started to learn how far our connections expanded down to Yuma, and in Caborca and, you know, up in Acamil land. And it was like just all these areas that I had no idea we were a part of, let alone being Hiachiratam. And then learning about the Hiachiratam story, what, you know, with what happened with the mining, the bombing range. There's a whole story that has not been told, but the surrounding tribes they have the stories, they have the pieces that fit together. And so it's like a matter of us coming together and telling each piece and researching each piece. And it's a huge story that hasn't really been shared openly, you know, but I feel like we're living it. We're living it, you know, with our families, with the piecing together a history, with even our schooling, you know, it's all coming together. But it's taken us a lot. Like for me, it's taken me a lot to you know, a little time to like connect to who I am as an O'odham, and then who I am as Tahano Hiachid, and then I found out I have Akumet O'odham in me, and so it's like it's a beautiful, you know, formation of us coming together, and it's a huge story, and it's slowly being pieced together, but there's so many pieces to it. And each of one of these individuals has been educating me, you know, and it's coming together. We're coming together, and it's definitely us breaking through those barriers that were established. And you know, whether it be roads, walls, or even laws, you know, we still exist as a people.
Definitely. Amra, did you want to add anything?
I can just add for folks who are not familiar with like O'odham peoples and our history that the O'odham, we were colonized by two different regimes of colonialism. First, the Spanish, who came and imposed missions and enslaved the people. And the mission system that the Spanish brought, you know, throughout the Southwest and throughout Latin America was a plantation slavery system. So when you see a Spanish mission, that's what it represents. It is that church was, you know, the reason to establish a plantation slavery economy and a mining slavery economy. And so our people resisted that, you know, and we have these ceremonies where we remember that resistance, you know, and part of that ceremony is running from one end of the village to the other, you know, and going across the border. Because that's how the resistance was spread, was through runners to carry the message of the revolt across the village, you know. And so our people endured and resisted that Spanish colonialism that still impacts us. That's why, you know, a lot of us have Spanish surnames, or, you know, our elders might speak Spanish, and half of our people are in Mexico. And then, you know, when the gold rush in California happened, then we were invaded by the US. And you know, the 202 is a good example of this ongoing extraction, because U.S. invasion came to O'odham people because we were, you know, on the road to California from the East Coast. So we were always treated as that road that settlers wanted to get to places to extract minerals, extract from the land and destroy it in order to make themselves wealthy. And the O'odham were always in the, you know, in the way of these trade routes, right? And we're still being treated that way, and that is how they continue to desecrate our sacred sites and our land. And so that kind of connects this history, you know, that the U.S. occupied us because of that. And then, you know, after the gold rush, then they wanted the water. You know, they wanted the Gila River, they wanted the Salt River, they wanted the Colorado River, they wanted the Santa Cruz River. And so, you know, they just keep going for, you know, the minerals, the land, the water, the farmland, and then our bodies, our labor as well. And so we're dealing with multiple layers of border, right, in multiple histories of colonialism. And so all of that impacts us, and it's complicated. It's complicated for us to come through, you know, because we have this experience of multiple layers of colonialism. We have this experience of, you know, connecting with, you know, our indigenous relatives to the South in ways that maybe other tribal nations in the U.S. don't, because we have that shared experience of resistance to Spanish colonialism that our relatives to the South have. But then we're also occupied by the U.S. and that U.S.-Mexico border divides us even from our own families and our own relatives.
Thank you for that, Emra. It really puts everything into context for everybody as well. So my last question before we field questions from people that are tuning in, I was just going to ask, what work does the O'odham Anti-Border Collective do now, and what is some work that you plan to do in the future? And that can be answered by anybody.
Well, um, if you follow our social media, this is the social media plug, the O'odham Anti-Border Collective. There is a lot of heat coming through from Tono and the actions that have been made, and groundwork, and also halting construction and such, that has come up in the in social media realm, in the social media network realm. So I think that for us, this is a continuing thing. Colonialism, settler colonialism is continuous. So we always have to think, for the future. What is this going to look like in 40, 30 years from now? Or what is our goals that we really need to be asking these questions, because we're just part of a larger, struggle ahead, and we're moving towards that. And I think, for me, just being in the back end, kind of looking at things and adding critically and stuff like that. I think about that because, I have family members and friends and brothers and sisters and relatives that are, in the East and everywhere else that are going to be also part of the struggle if they're ever in our territories, So bringing that knowledge and our perspective to it is for me, like bringing part of the work to it. Others have other ideas. So I think that, I think Nelly can maybe share a little bit, because, like I said, there's been a lot of media surrounding particular two individuals. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I don't think we really even intended for a lot of it. Everything's moving really fast. But about a year ago, well, everything's been moving fast. We've been fighting the towers. We've been fighting all these things. And then about a year ago, the wall came at us like faster than ever before. And prior to that, there's, just a lot of militarization that got Trump ready to get the wall up. So about a year ago in June, what's frustrating is that, the tribe, the Tono O'odham Nation, and then, we have, Gila River, Salt River. That's how the federal recognition divides us. But with the Tono O'odham Nation, we've been facing a border, and the administration, there's just a lot of agreements with Department of Homeland Security because of the proximity to the border. And so the areas outside of the reservation, namely Organ Pipe National Monument, Cabeza Prieta Wildlife Refuge, and the Berry Goldwater Bombing Range, I think there's an internal colonization within us as not recognizing those lands as O'odham lands, even though, it's we have a history, and especially here at O'odham, we have a, we can trace our lineage to Quito Paquito Springs. Amber being a direct descendant, and I also have family members that lived out there, and it's you know, all of those things came to a head because they started constructing on those areas because they were not the reservation. And so we thought we had time because there were environmental groups putting up lawsuits, like the Center for Biological Diversity and the Sierra Club were fighting the wall, and they won in the Ninth Circuit. But not even a month later, around July of 2019, they lifted the injunction, or they lifted the stay not to build. The Supreme Court did. And so we were thrust into a new battle outside of the towers, where we needed to figure out a strategy to move, to try to stop the wall. And so within this past year, we've been doing a lot, pretty much everything we can think of, but also having all of these barriers in the way. The area where, you know, we're talking about is very militarized. Pretty much we have to go through internal checkpoints to get to each area of the land. So coming from Tucson and going all the way down to Quito Baquito, we have to go through 2 internal checkpoints just to get down there. And so like getting mobilized and doing these things out there in areas that are so heavily militarized have been issues, sorry, tongue twisted. So anyways, we did what we could in ceremony and in runs, taking part in spiritual runs and trying to keep up with the tradition. And then all in the back of our minds, like, what are we gonna do to stop the wall? During this whole year, it's been a really heartbreaking process because we just, we're faced with so many barriers in trying to do that. And during COVID, the wall workers brought COVID to our communities. And so we were also dealing with the outbreak at the same time. Because the wall workers were not abiding by any precautions or regulations, there was an internal outbreak within wall workers. And so for that reason, for just you know, a month's time, it seemed like, you know, things were halting and we had time. They had done already a lot of construction, a lot of damage. They blasted Monument Hill, which was so heartbreaking to see them blasting, you know, a sacred area and site where we know that, you know, there are remains and there is a long history. And so we went through all that heartbreak, watched it build. We had that small break in time with COVID, but then after everybody got tested within the walls, they seemed to double down on things. All of a sudden, when we were all dealing with our own pandemic issues within our families because there were outbreaks all over the reservation and at home in Ajo. And so it just seemed like this big surprise. So we were out there in July. They were still like 8 miles to our sacred spring at that point. And but when we went out there a couple of weeks ago, they were already to the wash. And for those of you up north, you might not know what a wash is. Here in the desert, when we have our monsoons, since the ground isn't used to receiving a lot of rain, you know, a lot of it will just, you know, wash through the desert as like this big, powerful river. And so there's one of those right next to the sacred spring. We've also been monitoring the water levels, and because they've been drilling so hard to get water for the concrete and also to smooth out the roads for construction, we've also been watching the spring deplete. So when we were out there a few weeks ago, they were just right there. They'd already widened the roads 30 foot on each side. They already have most of the 30-foot steel barriers up and the concrete in the ground all the way up to that 8-mile point, up to the spring. And, you know, it's hard for me to assess really quick, but I mean, there's so much damage that they did, killing saguaros, which are sacred to us, Oregon pipe cactuses, which the whole monument is supposed to preserve. all these animals, all these plants, we just, everything's just destroyed. And so anyways, we felt like we were at our last resort, and Amber and I were there and took some action. We didn't intend to, actually. We were just there to pray, but we heard the construction so close to the spring, within yards away, and we both kind of just ran, and we recently were arrested for impeding their construction or destruction, which is, it just has so much. It's just so ridiculous that they can waive laws and they have this ultimate power in our homeland, in our territory, and yet laws apply to us in every way, shape, and form, even in our bodies, and we had a small taste of, Corrections Corporation of America, now CoreCivic, and how they treat undocumented peoples and all, brown peoples of color. It's pretty eye-opening and enraging, but that's all been in the past week.
Yeah, and I just want to add to, part of the breaking the barriers of colonization is doing what we're doing right now. We did on our own individual time, we did attempt to connect with our tribes. We did, bring these concerns to the Legislative Council. We did attend, we did, we were on our own individually, like acting within the expected guidelines, waiting for the lawsuit, waiting for the tribe to intervene, waiting for cultural monitors, waiting, and just, but it's still connecting, communicating, and documenting. And so what it took was us, taking what we know and what felt right and acting on that. And, just going to the spring and praying, and just praying, constantly praying, and just and asking what is it that we need to do, as Autumn, because in our stories, we're told that we're meant to keep the land. We're keeper, our creator created us to keep the land, and we come from the land, and we always hold a piece of the land with us. And we in the water, the water is sacred. The water helped also to create us and sustain us, and so like just acting in that, connecting and communicating in that way led us to just move forward in the ways that that we're sharing with you, and there's and so pretty much we have been asked that, how do you plan on moving forward? And it's like, we're going to continue sharing the truth. We're going to continue to bring to light what's happening, because these things need to be shared. Our generations to come, our youth, they need to know the truth. They need to know and remember that they have power in beyond the colonization, beyond like these laws, and beyond restrictions. Like we have freedom. We've always had freedom, and it's it's innate in us. Like and I feel like in that moment, I kid you not, we went there in prayer, we went there singing, and we heard the construction trucks, and we had to go. It was time. And, we grabbed everything, we ran, and we acted in faith of like, okay, like we're supposed to do this right here, right now. And, it didn't matter whether it was right or wrong. We just knew in our hearts that we were called to do that and be there. And there are things like, they should have cited us and released us, but they went ahead and used their colonial power. They wanted to show us, like, just like the government. And so like, so the position we're in now is, I guess you can say, like, it was interesting because it's in our papers, it's the United States of America versus us, versus Nelly Jo David versus Amber Ortega. And I feel like that's a huge statement in itself, but we know we have our people behind us. We have our ancestors, we have to do this. And so it's beyond them right now, and it's beyond us right now. And so we just have to continuously act in faith that we're doing what our ancestors intended for us to do and what we were made to do.
Yeah, and just real quick, I guess my biggest hope for the future is to stop that dang wall and tear it down and restore and revitalize that area, as well as all of the areas of the Autumn Jewett.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That's so inspiring to hear. And I'm so grateful to have relatives like you out there continuing to do this work on your homelands. It's really inspiring to anybody that is blessed to hear your stories. Yeah, and I guess my last question before we start winding things down was, and I was gonna field some questions, but we're kind of running short on time here. So I wanted to give y'all time to talk a little bit about actions that relatives here in Lenapehoking, elsewhere, can take to be in support or solidarity. Obviously, donating monetary funds, writing letters to people, things like that. So if we can just go through some of those, some of that information, and kind of maybe prioritize certain things if you feel that's necessary or not. But yeah, again, to people who are tuning in, we're here with the O'odham Anti-Border Collective. Blessed to hear them speak today. So I'll leave that up to y'all. I have some of the information here, so when you guys mention stuff, I will be sure to drop the links into the Zoom chat, and Tennis will be able to drop the links into the Facebook chat. I don't know. Let's see. Emra, would you like to? Yeah.
I was just going to suggest maybe Nelly take the question on next step.
I think there's so much that can be done, especially by relatives all over. Well, definitely, follow the O'odham Anti-Border Collective, and keep up with that information. Defend O'odham Jewett is supported by the O'odham Border Collective, but it's also like a different kind of. It's not completely separate, but it's separate. Supported by the O'odham Anti-Border Collective, but it's also encompassing another collective of folks. And so you can support Defend O'odham Jewett. You can also support the O'odham Anti-Border Collective. We actually haven't got our stuff together as a border collective and our funds as like a place where we're pending fiscal sponsorship. So more info on that. Stay tuned. But as far as like different support as like action, there's all these different companies that are coming from all over the place that are helping to militarize us. And I know this is a little bit out of your maybe jurisdiction or range, but in New Mexico, that's where the Southwest Valley Construction is coming from. And then Kiewit is also, I believe, South Dakota. They have manufacturing places. Where were we just at? We were just at Stinger and Fisher. Fisher Industries also have some of their industries up north. And they also have like all these subsidiary companies. So targeting those companies, I think, would be good solidarity actions from relatives. Elbit Systems, who's doing the integrated fixed towers, they are pretty much global. They are headquartered in Israel, and they have corporate headquarters here, possibly in New York area, possibly in those areas that can be brought attention to, as well as all of the immigrant detention facilities all over. They're just in almost every state. And they're making a fortune. CoreCivic Corrections Corporate, formerly Corrections, they still have all the Corrections Corporation of America logos on there. So like all of those things, I think, you know, targeting them from multiple places, they're all interconnected. They're all interconnected with these struggles. So definitely like, donations and stuff like that helps us, but also like action too. Actions from and solidarity with relatives across. And, you know, even maybe we can organize like, you know, days of actions with each other where we can all bring these issues to light, standing in solidarity as Indigenous nations and peoples that have all been affected by colonial barriers and borders. I know Amra's done a lot of research on like our trade routes and stuff like that. So it's bigger than just our lands. It's bigger than us. And you know, all of the tribes that are along the border were connected to these various trade routes. And so in decolonizing ourselves, I think those are, you know, important connections to make. And I'll leave it open if anybody else wants to add anything.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and add, like all those things, and like she was saying, like Nelly was saying, like they're all connected, and also just inviting, you know, them that Hiachid them, like folks who have been, somewhat tried to be erased. I don't think how many times I've heard people say, well, what's a Hiachid or what's a Akamad or what's a Tona Atam, you know what I mean? They only know us by like Pimas or Papagos or whatever. So inviting those in your spaces like you did, you know, Tati, you're a great comrade and everything, for having us here. And when we talk about these things, borders and walls and infrastructures, you know, like New York City, I know is heavily like that. There's just cities everywhere. Never been there, but I've seen the Google pictures. But you know, like those things, like even if you're in a town or a city, you know, I'm mostly based out here in Tempe, but it's still O'odham territory, and still having that connection to that land and recognizing that. And there's ways that we you know, talk about the different struggles and inviting the people that are originally from that territory to talk about these things. So I think all of that knowledge is very crucial because, like, you know, probably nobody knew what how they can attack these other infrastructures that are probably based in some of the large cities like New York or you know, San Francisco or like California, different area, other places. So there's definitely a tangle with that, and so I think that's important. Is original folks who know and are willing to share those types of things in solidarity.
Thank you. I think we're kind of transitioning organically here into kind of, you know, lasting things that need to be mentioned. So I think we can kind of follow that, and I'll just let whoever wants to speak, if they have any lasting thoughts, things they wanted to mention before we close up here. So I'll just go ahead and leave that open. Amra, go ahead.
If I could just add, there's a couple important next steps, especially that Indigenous folks can take. One is if you have influence with your tribal government or with any Indigenous collectives that you're a part of, it's important that you issue a statement opposing the U.S.-Mexico border and the militarization of the border and the occupation of Indigenous lands. Indigenous communities from, you know, California to Texas are all in opposition of this border. Many other tribal communities have set up land sacred protections camps. They are putting their bodies in front of the machine. So you can research, you know, those other tribes that we are in solidarity with along the border and how to support their camps and their direct actions right now. But it's important that your tribal government and that your tribal organization make a direct statement that you oppose the militarization of Indigenous land in this border. Also that you oppose the incarceration of our refugee and immigrant relatives. They've always put the incarceration of refugees and migrants on indigenous lands. You know, in Akimel O'odham territory, there were Japanese internment camps during World War II. There is a long history of this colonial government terrorizing and incarcerating Black and Brown people on indigenous lands, and you know, brutalizing indigenous communities in order to brutalize somebody else. And so we need to have solidarity against mass incarceration, how it affects our African American relatives, how it affects our immigrant and refugee relatives. And so it's important to make statements opposing mass incarceration and immigrant detention. It's important to research, you know, those entities in your area and do direct actions. You know, Nellie gave you a list of corporations that are involved in the border. There's, you know, many organizations involved in the infrastructure of mass incarceration and immigrant detention. Disrupt their business, make it impossible for them to work, make it impossible for them to function. That's the only way that we're going to stop them. And you can do that locally.
Thank you. And I think that's so important. I think a lot of Natives know this, that we have to attack from multiple fronts and, you know, multiple geographies and landscapes. So thankful for you mentioning that. Lastly, Nellie and Amber, any lasting thoughts or last notes? All right, cool. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I guess as far as like closing up, I just wanted to say, thank you so much from the American Indian Community House to our relatives out on O'odham territory. We appreciate you joining us. I think we have one more word over here from Napoleon. Go ahead.
Oh, I think we forgot to share our email or Gmail. My bad.
Okay,
okay. It's oabc1853@gmail.com.
Okay. OABC.
So any you know, interviews, comments, people who are watching in Facebook land or on here that they have questions, they can always submit to that. Because since the last couple of days, I've been kind of flooded with a bunch of emails about interviews. Only asking for particularly for 2 people, but it's cool. But yeah, any inquiries about that, we'll be sure to reach back out to you and set something up. What's up with the Hogai?
Awesome. Thank you so much. It looks like we posted it on our Facebook, but just not on here. So I'll go ahead and post that into the Zoom chat. oabc1853@gmail.com. If you have any questions for the O'odham Anti-Border Collective, you can write to that Gmail. I think there's also a phone number too that is in the Facebook, so I guess you can call that too. All right. Yeah, like this weekend, as far as the community house goes, we do have an event this Sunday, climate march, that is focused on racial justice, as it should be. Show up at 1 p.m. at Columbus Circle. Make sure you wear your mask, you abide by social distancing, and you can, I believe that link will be posted in the Facebook chat for you to check out all of the details. So be sure to check that out. It's co-hosted with the American Indian Community House, is a co-host with a bunch of other great organizations. Tomorrow we do have an event as well, Sacred Spaces, with Beverly Little Thunder at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is an elder space where they share knowledge and teachings, and that will also be streamed on Facebook Live. So be sure to follow the community house for updates on that. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great evening. Again, thank you so much for the O'odham Anti-Border Collective. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook for updates on what they're doing. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye. Hagona.